last two sections, you learned about imperialism in Southeast Asia and Africa. In this section, you'll learn about the British Empire in India. The Sepoy Mutiny. Over the course of the 18th century, British power in India had increased while the power of the Mughal rulers had declined. The British East India Company had given power by the British government to rule India. The British East India Company had its own soldiers and forts. It also hired Indian soldiers known as sepoys to protect its interests. In 1857, the Indians' distrust of the British led to a revolt. The revolt was known to the British as the Great Rebellion, or the Sepoy Mutiny. Indians called it the First War of Independence. The immediate cause of the revolt was a rumor that the British were issuing their Indian troops new bullets that were greased with cow and pig fat. The cow was sacred to Hindus. The pig was taboo to Muslims. A group of sepoys refused to load their rifles with the new bullets. When the British arrested them, the sepoys went on a rampage. They killed 50 Europeans. The revolt was quickly spread. The Indian troops fought bravely, but were not well organized. Rivalries between Hindus and Muslims kept Indians from working together. Within a year, the revolt was crushed. As a result of the revolt, the British Parliament transferred the powers of the East India Company directly to the British government. In 1876, Queen Victoria was given the title of Empress of India. Colonial rule. The British government ruled India directly through a British official known as a viceroy, or a governor who ruled as a representative of a monarch. British rule had both benefits and costs for the Indian people. There were four main benefits. British rule brought order and stability to India. It also led to a fairly honest and efficient government. A new school system was set up. Its goal was to train Indian children to serve in the government and army, but only elite, upper-class Indians could attend. Finally, the British brought railroads, the telegraph, and a postal service to India. British rule also had costs for the Indian people. British manufactured goods destroyed local industries. For example, the introduction of British textiles put thousands of women out of work and severely damaged the Indian textile industry. In rural areas, the British sent the zamindars to collect taxes. The zamindars took advantage of their new authority and increased taxes. This forced many peasants to become tenants or lose their lands entirely. The British also encouraged many farmers to switch from growing food to growing cotton. As a result, food supplies could not keep up with the growing population. Between 1800 and 1900, 30 million Indians died of starvation. Finally, British rule was degrading. The best jobs and best housing were reserved for the British. Despite their education, the Indians were never considered equals of the British. The British were also disrespectful of India's cultural heritage. An Indian nationalist movement. British racial attitudes led to the rise of an Indian nationalist movement. The first Indian nationalists were upper-class and English-educated. Some were trained in British law and were members of the civil service. In 1885, a small group of Indians formed the Indian National Congress. The Indian National Congress did not demand immediate independence, but did call for a share in governmental process. The Indian National Congress had difficulties because of religious differences. Many of its leaders were Hindu and reflected Hindu concerns. Muslims began to call for the creation of a separate Muslim League to represent the interests of the Muslims in India. In 1915, Mohandas Gandhi brought new life to India's struggle for independence. Gandhi was born in India but studied in London. He became a lawyer and went to South Africa. After he returned to India, he became active in the independence movement. He set up a movement based on nonviolent resistance. It had two goals: to force the British to improve the lot of the poor and to gain independence for India. Colonial Indian culture. A cultural revival took place in India in the early 19th century. It began with the creation of a British college in Calcutta. A local publishing house was soon opened. It printed textbooks on various subjects, as well as grammars and dictionaries in the Indian languages. The revival soon spread to other regions of India. Indian novelists and poets began writing historical romances and epics. Most preferred to use their own regional languages rather than English. The most famous Indian author was Rabindranath Tagore. He was also a social reformer, a spiritual leader, educator, philosopher, singer, and painter. Tagore's life mission was to promote national pride. Tagore was more than just an Indian nationalist, however. He worked for human dignity, world peace, and the mutual understanding between East and West.